Privet Katila von Ningrisky desu, and this is the weekly Russian-Ukrainian war update for the week of October 30th through November 5th of 2023. So today, for this week, for the overview, the intensity of clashes have gone down, but the clashes are still ongoing, and I'll be going over what changes have happened on the front lines this week. So we're going to begin with the kind of main kind of where the main heaviest clashes are happening this week, which is Avdiivka again, part of the Donetsk front. Basically, nothing else has happened on the Donetsk front so far on this week. Mostly in Avdiivka, so we're going to focus on this. Again, the purpose is to push Ukrainian artillery away from Donetsk itself to stop the terror bombings. So try to basically make the new front line, just more away so the artillery can't reach, at least regular artillery, can't reach Donetsk. The biggest part of the operation is taking Avdiivka. So what has happened in Avdiivka this week is going to mostly be on the north as well. So this week, the Russians are basically actually in a bit of a defensive stance, but also advancing. The Ukrainians have sent a bunch of reserves here. Also, they sent one of their NATO-trained brigades here from Zaporozhye, the 47th Brigade, with its Leopards and Bradleys, and they actually captured, I think, a Leopard getting destroyed near Stepova here, along with a few Bradleys. So the Russians, when they secure themselves along the rail line and the rail line here, the Ukrainians are trying to dislodge them and try to push them back to Krasnogorivka here. So the Ukrainians are on the attack here, but the Russians are basically on an active defense in the true sense of the word. They're not advancing, trying to get more territory. They're advancing to improve their positions here and wear out Ukrainian troops before they go on the attack. So this week, the Russians advanced more further north and took more to the north of Stepova here. They're still just advancing along the rail lines because this is a natural defense barrier. They also actually advanced. They passed this rail line and actually took a few positions in this forest plantation here, to the south of Nova Kalinova. This is where the Ukrainians are held up in the north, and they are basically using this point to try to attack the Russians in the north here, because this is another area where they could complicate the Russians, along with near Peremyska, and they've been attacking here as well, because this complicates Russian logistics in the north and south. But the Russians are on the attack. They've taken more trench lines, more forest plantations, more forest lines. They've advanced north, and they also expanded the buffer zone near the waste heap. They took the southern kind of this area right here. And the Ukrainians are now back in the coke plant. So as you can see, the Russians they took in more land in the north this week as well. However, the purpose of this is to improve their defensive posture here. The Ukrainians are also counterattacking; they are getting repelled, but that is the purpose of the Russians advanced here to improve their positions so they could repel Ukrainian attacks more better. So that's the purpose of that. And then actually, for when I talk about more advances in the Avdiivka area, I'm going to bring up Rybar's map for this week. As we can see the Russian advancements here, as we mentioned here. He also mentions that in the south, the Russians are on the attack and advanced up to the south of Severna and are attacking the Ukrainians on the forest plantation here, which is the last defense before the village itself. There's also been attacked. They have the Ukrainians in the southern part of Avdiivka itself have a few defense points. The first is the Donetsk filtration station, which is one of the defense fortifications to the eastern part. To the center part of this is this hotel, which is kind of part of this forest, a bunch of forest this here. And before they have to take these defense points if they want to reach the residential area. And then the former old military base in here. This is also another Ukrainian strong point. These areas are under Ukrainian control, and these are heavily fortified because these are part of the 2014 defense line. So these are they've been fortified for years. So there's been attack. The Russians are putting the squeeze here, but they haven't advanced too much here. But they have advanced in the south near Vodana up towards Severna. Again, These are small-scale attacks to improve their positions here. Again, they want to encircle Avdiivka, put the squeeze on it, but the Ukrainians have sent reserves, so this is going to be a long, bloody battle. This is going to take months. It may take 2 or 3 months for the Russians to actually complete their objectives here. So we shall see how it all plays out. So, there's counterattacks, there's counterattacks, and then there's improving their position. So this week we basically saw the Russians improve their positions in the north and south, but they haven't advanced per se. Like they want to advance and take these 2 villages, or advance to take these 2 villages. They're basically trying to repel Ukrainian attacks, and to do so they capture a bit more land to improve their positions. So the Ukrainians are still, the Avdiivka is the hottest point of the front this week, and it'll probably be the hottest point unless something happens elsewhere. But this has basically been the main show. Nothing else really to talk about in the rest of Donetsk front. One thing I wanted to also, let's talk about the south, they call this the South Donetsk area. I call this the Staro-Malinovka front, the Velika Novosoloka front. The Russian, ever since the Ukrainians moved their Marines away from here to Kherson to do their offensive here, the Russians have been on the attack here. Basically mostly in the north of Pryutia. So after the Ukrainians captured Staromayorsk and Urozhaina in August of, I believe it was August of this year, they've been trying to attack the flanks, because this is, again, the Russians have controlled the flanks with Novodonetsk and Pryutia, and that's why they've been trying to attack in these areas to flatten the front line so they can continue their attacks to the main goal of Staro-Malinovka here. However, they failed. Remember, they did an offensive here to try to take these 2 villages, and they failed, and they didn't take this. So after they decided that they're not going to attack here, after they brought away their main offensive units, the Russians went on the attack, mostly in the north of Pryutia. And this week, they've actually taken along this ravine. They took this ravine. We could look at Rybor's map here. You can see they captured more and advanced closer to this main road that connects Staromayorska, which is one of the villages that the Ukrainians took last summer, and Ronopil, which is actually another village that the Ukrainians took. The reason why the Russians gave up this village here is because the Ukrainians are advancing south here and threatening to cut this off, and so they kind of withdrew back, down here. And so the Ukrainians kept pushing, but they never been able to take this. And ever since they withdrew their units, the Russians have been on the attack. They first, they were kind of like on the outskirts. They took this area here, then they advanced here and took this, kind of like forest plantation tree line here. And now they advanced more north, and they are now on the reaching this main highway, this main road, this main paved road here. And so I guess the purpose here is to try to cut off the Staromayorska front here. And I don't think the Russians are trying to retake the land they lost back in the summer, but I think they might want to take these 2 villages, because these 2 villages basically make this a more kind of solid front line. And these are like 2, and they don't really need to take these villages, because then it makes like a bulge kind of thing, and the Russians don't really they want to keep the front line flat. So they might want to take these 2 villages, but I think that's the extent of it. Or maybe in a lesser sense, they just want to expand and improve their position on the flank, so that if the Ukrainians ever want to attack here again, it's going to be a lot harder for them to do so. So the Russians are on the attack north of Pryutia, taking this tree line and getting closer to the main defense point of the main paved road between Ronopil and Staromayorska. So the Russians have the initiative here. No changes on the Zaporozhye front, really. Last week we mentioned that the Ukrainians went on the attack here with armored vehicles. I think we went over it, but this week there wasn't any new advances here. There's still bombings and shellings like any other front, but this week there's been no changes. We're going to go to the Kherson front now. This is where the Ukrainians have the initiative. However, it's kind of... So the Ukrainians launched their Kherson offensive, and, they landed... They took these 2 villages, but were pushed out 2 weeks ago. However, when they landed in Krinky 2 weeks ago, they actually have not been able to get pushed out from here yet. So they kind of hold the center of the village. However, the outskirts are controlled by the Russians, and for some reason the Russians have not been able to push the Ukrainians out for the second week in a row out of Krinky. Again, the Ukrainians just have some positions here, but that doesn't complicate the whole defense structure here. It's just kind of interesting how the Ukrainians are somehow still in this village somehow. Now you might be wondering, like, okay, they'll probably eventually be kicked out, but even if they're not, like, what's the purpose of this? Well, it's actually a big question. We actually don't really know are they trying to actually break through here, or are they just trying to, like, suck Russian units here so they can attack in Zaporozhye? Maybe that's the case, because after they did the Kherson offensive and they took Krinky, or they occupied Krinky at least partially, they actually sent a massive armored assault in Zaporozhye, which was repelled with, like, I think they took one tree line or something near Robotina. But so maybe this is just to, like, kind of bring Russian troops, to draw Russian troops here to make it, maybe thin out the front line more. So, or maybe they're trying to actually occupy and take the land bridge this way. But so far, the extent of this operation has basically had them just stay in Krinky. For the rest of the Kherson, the Russians have been using massive fab bombings, and the Ukrainians have been massively shelling. So this is actually kind of the second hottest point of the front line outside of Avdiivka. The Ukrainians have the initiative here because they've taken multiple islands. They are, in various positions where they could attack. But so far they haven't been able to break the Russian defense line here. But right now, mostly the focus is on Krinky, where the Russians are trying to expel them, but the Ukrainians are holding firm in this village. We're going to now go to, let's go to Bakhmut. Ukrainians are still trying to break the Russian defense line along this rail line, but there hasn't been any big changes this week along this front, but the clashes still continue. There's actually been some changes in the north, which is where the Russians have the initiative. There's been some movements in the south of this, what they call the Berfika Reservoir. This is a defense point, and the Russians took the southern edge positions here. And so basically they're just advancing little by little, improving their positions here to basically make the northern sector more secure. The Ukrainians attacked here in the summer, but they gave up, and now they're focusing entirely on the southern portion of Bakhmut. We already talked last week. The purpose is they're trying to recapture Bakhmut, but without going in the north, that's not going to be possible for now. So now the more limited objective is to try to cut this main highway between Gorlivka, Gorlivka and Bakhmut, the main highway. So that's the purpose of the Ukrainians here, but there has been no advancements this week. There's been a small advancements to improve the tactical positions in the north for the Russians. But so far, that's basically back and forth in Bakhmut. No changes in the Severitsk front. No changes in the Liman front. There was no really changes on the Luhansk front. There's always, like, a lot of people saying the Russians are advancing and so on and forth, but it's kind of like in... I think what a lot of it is that they capture something and then it gets recaptured, and then they talk about capturing it again, but they don't talk about how they lost it in the first place. So maybe they didn't indeed capture something, like, multiple times, but it's not that it's like we took 1 kilometer this day or 1 kilometer after 2 days of fighting, but that might be because they advanced 1 kilometer, they got pushed back maybe 3/4 of a kilometer, and so forth. So maybe, like, the cumulative thing is not like we assume that, they should be very close or something, but maybe it's because they don't report their losses, and they only report their gains, and they repeat, like, recapturing something as a gain repeatedly. So, maybe that's kind of what's going on here, because they've always talked about Russian advances in this Luhansk front, but, we don't actually see much changes. The Russians have taken some positions, but, not that much. The Rybar says they've been trying to focus taking this area in the north here, this kind of forest plantation, kind of, multiple, these, like, kind of defense points here, which could, so Russians have been kind of focusing on this Klishivka defense point here, along with Sinkovka, but there's been really no changes here since the Russians stopped trying to take this village a few weeks ago. But yeah, most of the fighting on the Luhansk front is in the north near Kupiansk. But so far, there's only been some small changes, but no big changes thus far. So as you can see, the clashes along the front have been kind of, there's still clashes, there's still fighting. Um, Most of the action's happening around Avdiivka and Kherson. But so far, this war is still going on. But the fall weather has made offensive operations um, very hard. So we'll have to see what happens in the winter. But this war is a positional trench attrition war. We're not going to see big breakthroughs. We're not going to see big changes on the front for years, unless one army collapses and such. So we have to just basically look. This war is going to be us, talking about, oh, like next week the Russians took this tree line, or maybe the Ukrainians took a few more buildings in Krinky. So that's the extent of it. This is why I do this weekly update, because even after just talking about 1 week's worth of battles, as you can see, it's like, oh, they took maybe another forest like line or another tree line. See, it's very small scale. That's why daily updates are kind of not that. I don't think it's not worth doing daily updates, but that's why I do it weekly. But anyway, so that's the weekly update for this week. I'll see you guys next week. If you like this video, please give it a like and share around and comment your thoughts. And subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos similar to this one. So aim high, wander on, from America with Russian love.